Bon vivant, womanizer, befriender of Nazis. It doesn't sound like someone who would risk everything to save the lives of more than 1,100 Jews. Yet Oskar Schindler did exactly that.
I was deeply moved, almost shocked by this movie because it evoked the memories that I really thought I have swept under the carpet.
For Schindler's List, director Steven Spielberg traveled to Poland to film this remarkable true story.
How does he dare to do this? How does he dare? This is really impossible. Okay, the American Jews will be delighted. They will like it because it is their way of thinking, their way of looking, their way of grasping the reality.
Smile.
The film is not a history. It is not the true story of Oskar Schindler, written as a history or produced as a documentary. It is not a documentary, it is a feature film. And it takes the liberties that it seems to me it's quite proper for someone who is making a feature film to take. I first heard of Oskar Schindler in 1982, I think it was, because at that time Tom Keneally's book about him was about to be published, and I thought that even if half of it was true, there was enough of substance there to make a very interesting documentary. I spent a year making my film, and in that year I traveled the world talking to Schindler survivors, talking to Mrs. Schindler, talking to Amon Goeth's mistress. Amon Goeth was the commandant of the camp at Plaszow, and generally trying to accumulate information without relying on the Keneally book as fact.
He was a flamboyant bon vivant, a black marketeer and a gambler, a drinker and womanizer. To the Germans, he was a loyal agent for military intelligence. He was also Oskar Schindler, the man who stole Jews from the Nazis.
It gives me a headache. It gives me a headache.
Herr Director, don't let things fall apart. I work too hard.
It is a trend today to deal with the people who have saved the Jews. As I always say, if there were so many people who had saved the Jews, maybe less Jews would have been killed. I mean, it is what I call one of the distortions. It's out of proportion, you know. Because to make a film about Schindler, yes, but to try to encompass the whole Holocaust with this story, there is something is twisted.
When I first heard that the rights to Schindler's Ark were bought for Steven Spielberg 10 years ago, I think like most people, even now, there was a certain kind of skepticism as to whether this man who dealt in sentimentality, who dealt in a child's eye line, could in fact make a go of the Holocaust. And in fact, as recently as last year, when I had the opportunity first to speak to him about it, I was really very skeptical about how he would go about it. And he's actually gone for a very straight recreation of the very horrific events that were part of that life between 1939 and 1945.
I think Spielberg captured wonderfully the atmosphere of those times, particularly of the ghetto in Krakow. I escaped just before liquidation. It was on the morning before the final liquidation that my father cut the wire of the ghetto and I ran away. So I didn't live through this part of the film which deals with the small concentration camp called Płaszów, which was the place where they took all survivors of the ghetto before they send them to other heavier camps of death or concentration camps. One of the people who survived thanks to Schindler, is one of my friends who lives now in New York and who's at the end in Schindler's List. It's Richard Horowitz, who is a photographer in New York. I grew up with him, and I remember Richard in the ghetto before the final liquidation. He was a little kid. He was probably 3 or 4. I remember him even in the ghetto as a spoiled brat, and I never ceased to wonder how he managed to survive. One of the reasons for which he survived was that he was put in this latrine, you know, and he stood in a shed when they were taking all children of the concentration camp, you know, for the execution. Steven Spielberg asked me to direct this movie that he was going to produce, and I thought that I could not really deal with it. You know, as a matter of fact, on a couple of occasions he proposed this to me. I don't think that I would be able to make a film of such kind, you know, with so much impact. I think I was too close to the forest to see the trees.
Spielberg made Schindler's List in black and white against the wishes of the studio. He was able to argue, and argue convincingly, that his experience of the Holocaust was almost exclusively through black and white photographs and black and white archive footage, and that in order to make the film more truthful for himself and for the vast majority of the audience watching it who had never experienced these events, that he would need to do it in black and white.
I think if I were making this film, I would probably make it in color, because to me, indeed, the memories of those times are as I saw them. But to most of people, it's associated with black and white.
I say it is very stupid to show pictures in black and white, because there was not color at the time, but there was color in the reality. There were green forests during the Holocaust. There were beautiful blue skies. This is said in Shoah. I think that the color is very important, and that there can be an absolute contrast between the beauty of the landscapes and the horror of what is said.
Well, Shoah is a very, very good documentary. It's very powerful, because to hear people talking about things that they went through, they lived, has a strange power that you would not expect from a fiction film.
In Shoah, a Jewish barber recalls being forced to guide women into gas chambers, which were disguised as shower rooms. Lanzmann used no archive footage. In one of the most harrowing and controversial scenes in Schindler's List, Jewish women enter the showers, and Spielberg's cameras keep rolling.
The scene is very twisted, because the woman thinks that this is a gas chamber, and suddenly the water comes out of the ceiling. And during my watching of the film, I was asking to myself, but will he dare to go to this limit? And actually, he did dare. The Holocaust is such a formidable reality that it forbids to any kind of fiction to give a true account of what this reality has been.
I think that if you can entertain people and at the same time making them aware of some important issues, isn't it what the serious filmmakers were always striving for? Isn't it what the serious people were encouraging us to do? Isn't it what the critics always wanted us to do? To make the film that doesn't only entertain but also educate? Well, this film educates, you know.
The list is life.
This is really a happy end. And there is maybe an happy end for the people of the Schindler's List, but there is no happy end for the Holocaust. And whether you like it or not, this will be interpreted and considered as a happy end. The whole story looks too like an adventure story. The film of Spielberg will allow people to have pleasure and to cry too.